Thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer. The Scottish Chamber of Commerce stated that UK Government plans for immigration present a serious challenge for Scotland's economy and workforce. The Labour Government's rhetoric is demonising friends, neighbours and loved ones who have made their home here and a valued part of Scottish society. Has the UK Government provided any assurance over the plans to Scottish ministers, given that business leaders and public services have warned that the reforms will cause labour shortages and undermine business confidence?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, yesterday the First Minister met representatives from social care, education, the rural economy, tourism, businesses and local government to discuss the implications of the UK Government's immigration white paper. And we continue to urgently engage with the UK Government, highlighting the potentially deeply damaging impact that their measures will have on public services, communities and economy, much of which has been backed up by other stakeholders in the press. Scotland's working age population is growing only because of migration, and we call on the UK Government to recognise the distinct migration needs facing Scotland and work with us to deliver tailored migration solutions for Scotland.
From across the world and from across the UK. Latest data shows that more people chose to come to Scotland from the rest of the UK than leave Scotland, 13,900 more people. Like many nations across the world, Scotland's population is ageing. National Records of Scotland data shows that just over 20% of the population is aged 65 and over. Over the last 2 decades, the number of people aged 65 and above has grown by 36%, while the number of those under 16 has fallen by 5%. Indeed, the number of people aged 65 and over is projected to grow by nearly a third by mid-2045. The number of children is projected to fall by nearly a fifth. Our population is growing, but it is growing solely as a result of migration. John Roth
to sectors which necessarily rely on international talent. Scotland's working age population is growing only because of migration.
Well, like, you know, for the average person who listened to a wee compilation like that, they might just think that that's the SNP doing what they do best, and that's patting themselves on the back and bragging about how progressive and bold they are. But when you sort of read between the lines there, and I mean, I could have made that introduction an hour long, 2 hours long even, and it's just decade after decade, sort of parroting similar stuff in relation to our population is growing solely as a result of migration. That's why we need open borders, etc., etc. You know, when you read beneath the lines, what they're really getting at there, sort of indirectly, you know, continuing this normalization process that I've banged on about for fuck knows how long. If you think about it in a sense of Scotland has been part of the UK for the longest time. Scotland and the UK were obviously part of the EU for the longest time. And in such times, free movement was something that applied to all 4 countries within the UK, meaning that they could fucking move amongst themselves. And on top of that, they had people from not just the Commonwealth coming over here, but also free movement of people in the EU. And despite all of this, to this day, irrespective of the political climate, irrespective of what year it is, there's always people from the SNP making excuses for why there isn't enough people coming here, while simultaneously telling us continuously that if we don't get enough people here, our population will continue to age. And they make such a fuss about that. That's a concern. Yeah, it is a concern. But for different reasons. To them, that's just simply the political football in order to continue to justify pushing for immigration, as if that will solve all of our problems. And yeah, maybe it fucking would in terms of filling vacancies and whatnot. But the reality of the matter is, the elephant in the room here is our demography, you know? And that is something you will not find any of these people ever speaking about. It's become so normalized over the years that we're not having enough children. They don't even need to say it anymore, really. You know, they just simply talk about an aging population. Or they'll say that our population continues to grow, but it's solely down to migration. What does that mean? It means that we're not doing anything to contribute to a growing population, are we? No. You go through any of their white papers, any of their PDFs, any of their proposals, policies, etc., and there was fucking nothing about what happens to us long term. They've got all of these projections, etc. They've got all of the mathematics laid out nice and neat for you, but yet there is nothing about what happens to us. No. Just expendable little GDP units, apparently. I'll briefly go through this one. This came out this year. Migration, meeting Scotland's needs. Yeah. So if we just scroll down, January 2025, Scottish Government has set out 4 key priorities: eradicating child poverty, growing the economy, tackling the climate emergency, and ensuring high quality and sustainable public services. Migration is important for economic growth, but is only a feature of aggregate supply and demand. The positive impacts of migration are felt across Scotland's communities, so a tailored, responsive and humane migration policy can help improve outcomes through a positive impact on productivity, blah, 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 right? As well, of course, as well as enhancing our diversity, because that's what we fucking need. Don't worry about it. As long as we're enhancing our diversity, that's all that matters. But then it says that they're framing migration solely as a discussion about whether numbers go up or down is unhelpful. So instead, our focus should be on the needs of Scotland's economy, public services and communities, and setting out how migration can support those needs. The government's previously set out 7 principles to underpin migration policies. These principles remain relevant and should continue to underpin migration policy development going forward, such as migration policies should address the needs of all of Scotland, including those areas most at risk of depopulation. Depopulation being another word, obviously, it's self-explanatory, but it's sort of been drummed over the years into the sort of subconscious of most people's minds now. Mainstream media talk about it, politicians talk about it, and people just say in passing, now at this fucking point. And yet again, at no point do people take a step back and consider the consequences long-term for what that actually implies or what it means. And that's not to suggest, by the way, on a side note, that the government can wave a magic wand and all of our demographic problems would be quelled. But they could, at the very bare minimum, sort of try, But that would involve having to concede that we're a people, and we're not allowed to do that, are we? And that's part of the issue here. And if you think I'm talking shit in that regard, then just look no further than the nonsense they teach kids nowadays. Migration policies should encourage and enable long-term settlement in Scotland, welcoming people with a range of skills we need to work, raise families, and make a positive contribution to society. Scotland should be able to attract talented and committed people from Europe and across the world to work and study here without excessive barriers, and our migration policy should support mobility, collaboration, and innovation. Migration policy should support fair work, protecting workers' rights, paying access to employment, and preventing exploitation and abuse. People who are entitled to live in Scotland, both international migrants and UK citizens, should be able to bring close family with them, and the migrants should have access to services and support to encourage integration. The migration system should be easy to access and understand and focus on what a prospective migrant can contribute, not on their ability to pay. Therefore, fees and charges should be proportionate. So progressive. Right. I'm not going fucking through most of this. There's a few other bits here, right? So it says, this short paper outlines Scotland's distinct demographic challenge. Yeah, again, what does that imply? What does that imply? The economic impacts of migration and the impact of changes to the migration system over the past year before outlining policy options designed to ensure that the migration system meets Scotland's needs. Oh, yeah, our needs. So this is what I'm talking about, all right? Our history of migration is different to that of the rest of the UK. The dominant migration story through much of Scotland's history has been a story of outward migration, of people leaving Scotland to build their future elsewhere. Right? And then it says, Scotland's population has been growing in recent years, reaching a record high, right, of 5.5 million. This is because more people have moved into Scotland than have left, and is despite deaths outnumbering births each year since 2014 to 15. Yet more fucking red flags. Yeah? All of a sudden, excess deaths are through the roof. All of a sudden, our birth rate's at record lows. But it's fine, because we'll just import people who were just like me and you, irrespective of their colour or their creed or their religion or their nationality and whatnot. They're just as Scottish as you and I, and it's fine, Thank fuck they're here, because without them, our population would be shrinking, with no concern whatsoever put into practice in relation to what that means for us. But this is my point. It pisses me off, all this nonsense. The population has grown as a result of both international migration and people moving between Scotland and the rest of the UK. In the years between mid-2022 and 2023, the numbers of international migrants moving to Scotland has been much higher than in previous years. This recent increase in international migration into Scotland can largely be explained by an increase in international students studying at universities in Scotland. So progressive, yes. I think there was like one more wee bit here. Here we go, yeah? Right. Migrants are generally younger than the population as a whole. The most common age groups for international moves to and from Scotland in the year mid-2023 were 16 years of age to 34. However, across the population of Scotland as a whole, the number of children and the number of people aged 16 to 64 have generally been falling. That means as a people, that's what they're speaking about here, but it's fine. They don't need to elaborate. They don't need to give you any doom porn. They don't need to give you pause for thought. No, it's fine, because we'll just import people. And, not only will they have children on your behalf, they're also going to be younger than you, Oh, wow. Thank God for that. By the middle of 2045, the number of people aged 65 and over is projected to grow by nearly a third, while the number of kids is projected to fall by nearly a fifth. And recent statistics demonstrate that Scotland continues to be an attractive and welcoming country, which people from across the UK and internationally are choosing to call home. Oh, is that so bullshit? Anyway, right, so there's enough of that. But my point is, though, like this is what I'm speaking about, like aging populations, what they keep talking about, They're obsessed with this. They love to repeat it over and over and over again, I actually shudder to think of the hypothetical world where the SNP had complete control to be able to implement all of the sort of guff that they come away with. And again, just to sort of re-stress the point, at no point throughout all of their aforementioned guff did they ever really bring up anything whatsoever about us as a people declining what it means for us long term. No, they don't do that. It's just constantly bootlicking and groveling and whining and moaning and like more bootlicking, etc. And talking up to no end about the positives that come from immigration, despite the fact, long-term, ramification-wise, demographically speaking, it means the end of us as a people, without sounding too much of a doom porn enthusiast. But regardless, such as this sort of shit right here. In Scotland's government's aim is to ensure population growth, and Scotland supports sustainable, vibrant, resilient communities that drive an improvement in inclusive growth. Our vision for migration policy is to attract people who can make a positive contribution. This vision is underpinned by values of dignity, fairness, and respect. Oh, just fuck off, man. It goes on and on and on and on. Nothing new there. But 2 seconds, sorry. Taking together these principles, values, and this vision, the Scottish Government would approach the design and delivery of policy across the whole of the borders, immigration and citizenship system in an independent Scotland. They will be rooted in Scotland's national performance framework, touching on the kindness, dignity and compassion, respect for the rule of law, openness and transparency. I mean, come on. And then it says here as well, the government's citizenship and migration policy priority is to encourage people to live and work permanently in Scotland to maintain Scotland's vibrant society, helping to address demographic challenges. Of course. I'm not going to do anything about trying to reverse the trends at play here in relation to our demographic challenges. No, that's fine. We just need to do everything that we can to ensure that the route remains open for as many people to slide in here whenever the opportunity arises. It's just remarkable. And then it goes on and on and on and on And I love this bit here as well. You know, where did it go? I just seen it. There we go. Scotland is and will always be a good global citizen. Of course it will be. Of course. Spread those butt cheeks for the bureaucrats. Yes. I mean, this goes on and on and on and on, but there is references, obviously, to our, as a people, well, declining. That's as much as you'll ever get as far as acknowledgement goes. But it does make the odd reference to it here, but it's simply done in the context of justifying why we need immigration. But then, of course, in the fallout of Keir Starmer as of late, the SNP have not only all been crying about it in Parliament, you're seeing a lot of articles starting to come out now, and they sort of blur the lines and they conflate things, which sort of pisses me off. Well, I'll show you a wee brief example of that quickly. For example, we have Hamza Yusuf here, who you can't out Farage. Labour's immigration gamble is a dangerous mistake, writes Hamza Yusuf, who said, a couple of months ago now, he's apparently going to be leaving the UK because it's racist and he fears for his safety. Yeah, here he is. Still chatting bollocks. Standard, you know. And then it's just this bit here. Even the fucking start of it. Framing our increasingly diverse nation. So as time goes on, it's just going to get more and more, quote unquote, diverse, is it? Yeah? And that's fine. Anyway, it has been contaminated by foreign customs, languages, and loyalties. It was a moment that underlined a lamentable truth. The Labour Party has become so desperate to stem the decline in their polling, they haven't just lurched to the right, but are comfortable embracing rhetoric once confined to the hardest edges of the Conservative Party. Oh my God. It's a dog whistle to voters who blame migrants for every social ill. This is something they do all the time, and it's basically the equivalent of fucking gaslighting. You know, I don't need to preach to the choir there, but I'm sure you've all heard it before. Scapegoating migrants, blaming migrants for all, as it says there, every social ill, you know? When it can't be denied that immigration has, at the very bare minimum, completely exacerbated every single fucking part of society that is struggling, whether it is housing, whether it is school placements, whether it's just traffic on the road, whether it's trying to get a dentist appointment, the list goes on. You cannot say that migration doesn't play, at the very bare minimum, a part. But they won't do that. They will completely ignore that and then accuse you of just scapegoating them. You know, in order for them to concede that they play somewhat of a part, they give you ammunition. Hence why they say fuck all. Anyway, let's be clear. No one sensible advocates complete open borders. Well, that's practically what the UK's had for the longest time now, you know? And look at the fucking state of England. It's all right for us up here in Scotland in some parts. It's basically the equivalent of Ivory Tower that dickheads up here speak about, or speak from, I should say. Anyway, before I get any more into that, another article, Scotland has not turned against immigration. Oh, fuck off. And then you get the photos such as that. Refugees are welcome. A little dickhead here with his COVID masks saying no human is illegal. Oh, the cringe. Or what about this one? Sheer racism is driving this dire threat to Scotland's economy. Just from 11 hours ago, We need to welcome migrants with open arms. Unless it does so, the economy or the economic future of the country is bleak, and the outlook for those who might at some point be in need of help and support is dire. Whatever the racists in the Conservative Party, Labour, etc. might say, Scotland needs a strong inward migration policy linked to a whole raft of social and economic policies. So you're racist if you've got a problem with open fucking borders, you know? They just deliberately ignore certain parts of this country, or the UK anyway, that are unrecognizable. They just pretend that that's not happening and stand there or sit there even and bang on about how it's evil and racist and far right. You know, I'd like to see these people live in parts of the country that I've just mentioned. You know, I fucking wouldn't want to live there, eh? Then it says the government and other Scottish source data strongly support the argument that women of childbearing age in Scotland now, on an average, are only having 1.28 children. Right? So below replacement level. Where's the concern in relation to that? This article doesn't mention fuck all about it. Of course it doesn't really. Right? At present, the Scottish old age dependency ratio is about 31, meaning there are 31 people aged 65 and above in the population for every 100. 40 years ago, this figure was around 20. By 2045, it's expected to reach 35, and it might go even higher, right? There's no disputing that our population is aging. But my point is that the concern that generates is not being highlighted and discussed in the correct fashion. It's been simply used as a means to push for immigration. What does this mean for us as a people, right? I think that's the sort of questions that should be getting asked here, instead of simply looking to the future and imagining a Scotland that's diverse and filled to the brim of people from all over the fucking world. What about us? Jury's out on that one, eh? Adios.